Todd Colton is Senior Director of Program Management at Sentera. He joined Lockheed Martin in 2001. You can just have a seat. Started working with drones in 2002, which was basically driven by 9/11 and the UAV industry taking off, predicated with our going to Afghanistan. That core group from Lockheed Martin moved on to UTC Aerospace. There was about 10 people working on the drone project at Lockheed Martin that all kind of stayed together, went to UTC Aerospace. That ended up being bought by Fourth Wing. And then ultimately Sentera was in essence that same core group that started Sentera back in January of 2015. They're now 50 plus people and doing a lot of cool things. Just a quick story before we get started, and I'll join Todd up there. I was doing one of these lunches in the fall of 2014 and got a call, and a mutual friend of Todd's had said, hey, you should call Rick and talk to him about what we were doing. And so I got a couple of voice messages at these lunches like I usually do, and I did skip. And then I got to one, well, this one sounds kind of interesting. And as I was riding down the parking ramp from the 5th floor, where I always parked, to the bottom, I went from never knew this guy, never had heard the story, and by the time I got to the ground floor, I knew that I wanted to work with him. The story was very compelling. At the time, it was cutting edge and exciting, and so from the very first time that Todd left that voicemail on my phone, this was a company that I wanted to be involved in. So very excited to have Todd back. He's been here before, and we are going to talk all things drones today. So thanks for joining us.
Okay.
All right, so Todd, regarding your, got it going? Regarding your bio, did I cover everything, or would you add any color to the story?
No, I mean, that's pretty good. I'd say we're going to talk a lot about drones today, but we'll also talk about Sentera and other things that Sentera does around imagery and image processing and data analytics, like doing useful things with drones. I did get my start in the drone world in 2002, so a lot of people have kind of been aware of drones for the last decade or so. I'd say that's been the commercial kind of activity beyond that, but I've been doing it a lot longer before that and saw the technology kind of go through multiple cycles. So it's just been interesting. For me, it's been really lucky to build a career around this type of technology, and yeah, glad we're still doing it.
Cool. So toward the end, I'm going to try to have a couple minutes for folks to ask questions. So if you have a question, maybe jot it down. I'll try to get to it later. If we end up not getting to it, but you've written it down, you can hand it to me, and somehow you'll see some content about answering your question come out at some point in time. So hope to get to your questions. Before we get to the Sentera story, the very important thing is, when am I going to be able to get food delivered to my house via drone?
Sure. Well, you'll maybe sooner than you think, actually. I'm not sure how many people really pay attention to what's out there, but burrito delivery is a real thing, and Google, in fact, is somebody who's been investing a lot of money in that for going on about a decade as well. So about when we started Sentera 10 years ago, that was this real inflection point when drone technology was kind of coming out of what was a military thing into the commercial space. And Google and their X division that does kind of moonshot projects started up something called Wing, and they've been fully focused on delivery drones, and they've been dedicated at it. In fact, some close colleagues of mine I used to work with jumped ship and went, and they've been at Google for the last 8 years or so doing that. And they started at some college campuses. Virginia Tech was one where they did this, and it was literally burrito drones. That's what they were doing, is delivering burritos. And now they're in maybe a dozen different cities now doing some proof of concept stuff. It's still sort of small, and it's been kind of a slow journey of getting out there, but it's happening. Amazon has been investing in this. They've put, I think they've said publicly that they've put $1 billion at this, at delivery drones, just in internal investment. They've been doing this solid for the last decade or so. Really, just this in the last few months, they've started to kind of break cover, and you can see all sorts of YouTube clips or TikTok clips or whatever of these Amazon delivery drones dropping off packages in. I think it's like College Station, Texas, and there's another city they're doing it in too, kind of on a trial basis. So I used to be skeptical of that, but it seems to be happening, and there seems to be a lot of money continuing to be put behind it, and I think it's a real deal. So I don't know, when will it be here in the cold north? I'm not sure, but
all right. So soon we can get burritos to the house. Okay.
Yep.
All right. And what do you make of all the drone activity over the last couple of months on the East Coast? Obviously, a lot of information in the news. I see some heads nodding out there. So have to ask the important stuff first. So.
No, it's for sure, and it's interesting. I was just at some events with some of our customers in New Jersey yesterday, and this came up, and it obviously New Jersey was sort of where a lot of this was happening, and they were obviously pretty interested in what I thought too. So honestly, I think the real answer is nobody really knows what was going on, but it was out there in the public consciousness. It was kind of a phenomenon for about a week. There's maybe two serious possibilities that I've heard talked about. One is this idea that maybe there were some state actors that were involved with, trying to cause disruption and the rest, and there could be something behind that. But I think that, to me, I'm not sure there was any real evidence of that, and you start to wonder, does that border on conspiracy or not? It certainly is plausible and could be concerning if it was. There's also Occam's razor, and this is kind of my where I kind of land on it in my mind, is that the simplest explanation is probably the most likely, and it probably so it could be a simple explanation, could just be some hobbyists or somebody interested in public displays of art going out and stringing up some Christmas lights on some drones and flying it around and kind of causing a spectacle. And then maybe they see it on the news at night nationally, and they kind of get an adrenaline rush, and they go to their friend, are we going to do this again tonight? Yeah, we're going to do it again tonight. So it's just one of the. So who knows, really? But it's interesting. I think that one thing I've learned in my career, spent most of my career working with drones. I've got a background in aerospace engineering, so I know the technology and the development of how it all works and the rest. As the technology that I'd been working on for a decade in kind of one space kind of became commercialized and made its way into the public consciousness, as technology intersects society, all sorts of interesting and unknown things happen. And as an engineer, that was a really strange feeling for me, because I thought this great, awesome technology, everybody was going to love it as much as I loved it, I thought. But no, it turns out society is a really complicated place, and there's going to be lots of feelings and opinions and other things to consider in terms of how technology integrates. So you get back to the delivery drone thing too. It's, there's a lot of serious issues that we have to work through as a society together to decide, do we want these buzzbots cruising down our streets and flying over our houses and dropping things in our front yards, or not? Or what do we have to do to make that an societally acceptable, sort of operation or practice? And so, anyway, there's the whole Jersey drone thing, and the kind of hysteria that gets around that is it just shows that it can be kind of a lightning rod topic sometimes.
Well, that definitely was a lightning rod topic. Anyway, thanks for sharing that. Putting aside the joking about food and et cetera, one of the interesting things about Sentera is you've now been around for 10 years. So is a startup still a startup after 10 years?
That's a good question. And I think when we started it, we didn't think that we would, we thought, we dreamed it'd be great if we were still doing it 10 years from now, but we didn't know what that was going to look like. And, we still consider ourselves a startup. We are still innovating and still focusing on developing new technology and new value for the company. And I think we are VC backed. We've been very lucky to have some good investors who are, understand the timescales that operate in agriculture, which is a big focus of what Sentera is based on now, is doing drones and imaging in agriculture. And things take more time, and sometimes you have to, it takes time to find the things of value or that can create value. So we've sort of adjusted our focus or adjusted which products we were going to really focus on over the last decade, and so we've gone through a few sort of phases. But at the same time, I wouldn't ever say that we've pivoted away from our core mission and from the initial vision that we had when we started the company. It's still been pretty close to that, but we've been nimble enough with our product focus and nimble enough with our, the way that we work with customers to kind of evolve over the decade and still be relevant as a startup.
So talk briefly about the startup story of Sentera and what initially motivated the team to launch the company.
Sure. So the group of us that started it, and me and maybe a half dozen and a half other folks had been working together on drone technology going, as I mentioned, since 2001, 2002 in the early days. We were a highly technical team, a group of engineers that had been doing this to develop military drones that were, over the hill surveillance, down the road surveillance. We worked at a big aerospace company, Lockheed Martin. As part of working at a big company, we worked with a lot of suppliers that were small companies and small startups, and so we'd go to them and say, hey, can you build this part for us, or can you help us with this piece of the technology, or can you, whatever. So we end up building up these close network of small company suppliers. And when we were at the big company, we always looked and said, we're on the wrong side of the fence here. This looks way more interesting and potentially way more lucrative to be one of these like startup companies that's developing a lot of the parts or core fundamental technologies that the big companies like our company was purchasing. So we kind of always had this idea that it would be neat if we could flip the script somehow. We were at Lockheed. We then went to Lockheed had a big facility in town here. They ended up shipping that work off to some other states. We had an opportunity to go work for another company, another aerospace provider in town. We did that for a few years. They ended up spinning that off. Our product, they ended up licensing that off to another small company. We worked for them for a short kind of boom-bust cycle. And then we found ourselves, it's the same group of folks that have been together for a long time. We found ourselves with an opportunity to either split up and go our separate ways, or to say, you know what, now's the time. It's 2014, 2015. The commercialization of this technology just seems to be starting. Like, this is the time to do it if we're going to do it. If we're going to make our own company and take the destiny into our own hands. So that's sort of how we came about deciding to do it. We thought this was the time. So that was the history of kind of starting up Sentera. That initial core group of a half dozen or a half dozen and a half. We picked up a few other people along the way. So within the first few months, we were at about a dozen employees. We had some technology that we had inherited from the previous company. We had a pretty clear vision and pretty good know-how of how we were going to go develop this type of little flying robots, little drone technology, but try to go after different industries. And from there, we said we're not sure which industry is going to adopt this first, but it might be agriculture, it might be infrastructure inspection, it might be public safety or law enforcement. So we made a web page that had all three on it and said, let's see what sticks. And so we had customers pretty quickly in all three verticals, but the agricultural customer, that segment, is the one that kind of grew year on year, and the others kind of stayed small, and pretty soon agriculture consumed it for us. And I think being based here in the Twin Cities, you look around 1,000 miles in every direction, and it's corn and soybeans and wheat, and it's a pretty good place to be if you want to focus on an agricultural type market.
So almost all the original founding engineering product team are still together, and it's now been multiple different destinations. Why do you think that is? I don't know. We're either stupid or or lazy. I'm not really sure. Actually, I think it has a lot to do with the group of folks that have been doing this. We all had a lot of respect for each other. We all kind of had our own niche and our own kind of area of expertise. We
we had a pretty good leader. Eric Teipel is he was the original CEO. He's our CTO now. He runs the whole engineering team still. So we'd been working for him for a long time, and we had a good operating. We had a good way of working together, I guess I'd say, and that's just kind of continued over the last decade or so. So part of it is we started up Sentera with this mission. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about what our vision there was, but it was start a drone company, focused probably on sensors or the things that you put on the drone that are ultimately there to create value. It wasn't just about can you fly a little robot around the sky, even though that's what I get excited about. But the real value was going to be the cameras or the sensors you put on board to do a really specific job. And whether that job was something in agriculture, which it ended up panning out for us, or other industries. And then once you have that sensor, write some software that will do something useful with the imagery or the information you're getting from that sensor. And ultimately that useful information, that some type of analysis or insight that you generate from the imagery through using a software platform, that was the end destination. So we kind of started up Sentera doing that. We stuck with that vision the whole way. And I think that's part of why the core team is stuck together, because we haven't wandered too far from what our original idea was. And we still seem to be, having lots of interesting things to go do in that space.
So despite the tactical changes and the changes along the journey, you've stayed pretty close to that original vision. Why do you think that is?
Well, it was I think it was a good idea, to be honest. So, the original vision was ultimately that the real value in developing drone technology is at least in commercially, is what is the end thing you're going to do with it. We decided to focus on information you can gather from the air as being the thing of value. But the way we go about that we've had to change or adjust as technology has changed, or as use cases have changed, or as really the market has evolved too. The understanding of how you might be able to use this type of technology. So let's think of agriculture specifically. There was a lot of ideas around going out and taking pictures of farm fields, and there's going to be tons of value that we can directly apply to farmers. And there is, but I think we're still on a long journey of ultimately the value that's making it directly to the end farmer. And what we found along the way is that a lot of the product development companies in agriculture might have a more immediate use case for this type of technology. So if you're John Deere, for example, and you're developing a new tractor that's going to go out and do some precision planting in a field, from a product development standpoint, they can do a lot of trials in fields, and they can walk. And these are huge, giant farm fields, and they would send teams of summer workers up and down the farm field, making measurements, taking notes, seeing how well the seeds went in the ground, all the rest. A company like Sentera comes around and says, we can help make that 100 times faster or 1,000 times faster by flying a drone over the field, taking hundreds or thousands of photos, analyzing those photos automatically to see how many plants did it plant, how tall did they get, what is the spacing of the plants even, and you can get a lot more information way quicker and much cheaper. And so companies like that, like John Deere or like others, have been the ones that have, I'd say, in agriculture over the last decade, embraced this type of technology earlier or first. And so that's kind of what we've built our business around largely.
So there were multiple waves of technology that was going on here. You had the drone technology, you had digital agriculture. How did these different waves of technology interplay and develop together?
Yeah, so digital agriculture is sort of a big, that's a big industry or market more broadly than just drones, right? It's a lot about putting technology on farm, on machinery that operates in the farm, taking other sources of data, think about satellite information or weather information, and trying to bring that together in a software platform that helps make farmers helps make their job easier, but also helps give them better information for managing their operation overall. So we viewed, Sentera has one small piece of that, which is how can we, if you're going to improve farming operations through using the information revolution by digitizing parts of their operation. They're going to need information. You need input information. Like you need, and satellites and weather are two good sources of that, but they're not very specific. And so high resolution imagery of the plants that are actually growing in a field is a really good way to get information, to feed that into the digital infrastructure that's being built around digital farming, to help optimize processes, help make decisions, the rest.
So one of the things that the entrepreneurs here in the audience work on, as well as folks who would watch this out in the digital space, are product market fit. How did Sentera identify? You mentioned there were three verticals: the ag, the inspection, and the public safety. And I've often thought if I was really smart, I would have been able to tell you on the front end what to do. But we were all learning. But how did you, again, identify and validate your product market fit?
That's a really good question, and that is when you have a good product market fit, your whole business becomes easy, right? One thing that Sentera, one of the secrets to our success is that we've actually we've been quick to try new things and quick to try a lot of things. And we said yes to a lot of customers in the early days, maybe too many, but we weren't afraid to keep saying yes and find the things that actually found us success. And so we made a lot of mistakes and we failed a lot along the way, but they were small mistakes, and it was easy to recover from them or easy to set them aside because here were some things that actually we found some success on with. So whether that was developing a product that directly addressed a customer need, a short-term customer need, or whether it was knowing that by taking our software and integrating it with some of the other major softwares that are on the market, like John Deere has a big software platform, and Bayer Monsanto has a big software platform called Climate Field View. By being early and integrating and trying to play nice with those bigger platforms, we were able to kind of get the tailwinds from them and kind of come along for the ride as those platforms are growing, so to speak.
So you integrated a variety of different technologies. You disrupted some traditional farming practices. What ripple effects do you see happening across the industry?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. I actually go back to 20 years ago when I first got started in this, and we made our first little UAVs that the Army was using, and I was at an event. They were doing some training here on the U.S., but I was talking to I think it was a major, and he was talking about how really quickly this type of technology of having an eye in the sky totally changed the way they operated, the battlefield for them, and to the point where their particular group kind of had this, like, they refused to leave the base without a drone overhead anymore. It was a game changer, and this was, at the time, drones were really seen as sort of a little toy, a little, like, not really not really a serious piece of military equipment. What is this, a distraction? Is it, we're wasting resources on this? But as soon as they got into a real situation and they found the value in it, the guys on the ground, so to speak, said, "We're not ever going back. We're not ever going to leave base without this, the eyes in the sky over our head watching out for us anymore." So that was this switch changed, and it was this kind of grassroots thing. So I say that to say that at Sentera, I've seen similar things happen, and it's been pretty cool. So in seed product development, so you've got these companies that are breeding new seeds, better soybeans or better corn that'll yield more, or they'll have more disease resistance, or they can stand up to a storm better, or they're more drought resistant. They're always sort of through breeding practices. Think of like breeding cats and dogs. Same thing. They're breeding plants to do the same type of thing to get certain traits out of them. So the seed companies, they've been doing this for 100 years. This is how they operate and how they create their new products. Well, In order to breed these, what they do is they plant lots of small little miniature fields or little plots, and it might be just 10 feet across and 20 feet long. And they'll do this. They'll plant thousands of these, and each of these little plots will be a slightly different variety, genetic variety, or slightly different breed of soybean or corn or whatever it is. And they'll plant thousands of them in one field, and then they will replicate that hundreds of times across the Midwest or across the country, and they see how they do. They track every one, and they see how does that particular strain work. How does it manage the environment? What does it yield at the end of the season when they go harvest the yield? And they feed all that data into these big giant statistical machines, and they try to find, of those tens of thousands of different varieties they've got, which were the ones that were the outliers, which were the ones that were the superstars in certain areas. And then they take the seeds that they harvested out of that tiny little one, and then they go plant that in a bigger field, and then they plant that in a slightly bigger field. And so it takes like multiple years to go through this process. So this is the breeding process for seeds in agriculture. We've worked with companies now who have started using our technology and drones and imaging to take the measurements across those tens of thousands of little miniature plots or micro plots. It used to be they would walk through the field with summer interns, and they'd have a notebook, and they'd be able to fill out a handful of data points. Now they can capture, just by flying a drone overhead, they can have one person flying that drone instead of an army of summer workers. And they can do it with imagery, and they can capture hundreds or thousands of different measurements or different data points from that type of information. And so all of that feeds into this big giant statistical machine they have, and it gives them a lot more power to find the outliers or find maybe earlier or different signals of which plants were growing slightly faster than the other ones, and did that give them an advantage over the other ones? Or maybe that was harmful because they got too big for their britches, and when the big windstorm came by, they all just blew over because they were too tall. You know what I mean? So all of that's kind of information they have. So the big breeders, they're all doing this with drones now, and they've all said they're never going back. And in fact, they're actually changing the way they plant these fields now to optimize the way they can take the measurements with aerial imagery. So it's just been interesting to see how our technology, the type of technology that we're working on, is actually changing the way they go plant farm fields now, because they know they want to take the measurements in a certain way, and if they plant it a different way, they can get better measurements, and so
that's great. That's great. You mentioned earlier about strategic partnerships. John Deere, Climate Corp have been important to Sentera over the years as you've grown and created more of a presence. How did you go, for the entrepreneurs out there who want to pitch a strategic partner, how did you go about pitching these strategic partnerships to those large companies?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of being in the right place at the right time, where so John Deere, and it's people hear about this now too, where John Deere is trying to position themselves as a technology company, not just a tractor company. But they've been working on this vision or this idea for a long time. And so a decade ago or so, they had built out this software platform called John Deere Operations Center, or My John Deere. And it was a way to farmers track their equipment and track what's happening, their maintenance schedules and the performance of their equipment, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Well, they were building out this digital platform, and they were hungry for information. They wanted to feed their digital platform with data. And they didn't really have that many sources of data. They kind of had some, like they could get some information from the tractors maybe, but it was pretty limited. And so here Sentera shows up, and we're a technology company who's focused on developing, using drones and high resolution imagery to capture data in farm fields. And we went to them and said, we have a way to get you a whole bunch of data to put into your system. Can we work with you? And so we were the first, quote unquote, drone company to integrate with the John Deere software, and then also Climate Field View, which is the other big one that's out in the market. We were the first drone company to integrate with them from our data being compatible with their system, and then actually hooking up, the software systems behind the scenes over what are called API connections. We showed up, and we had a a solution to a problem they had. Their problem was they needed data to feed their system, and we were a new and interesting source of data for them.
So solving their problem.
Yeah, right.
Simple as that. Innovation strategy, you've been integrating emerging technologies. What processes have you put in place to maintain a competitive edge in not only agriculture, but in drone technology, fast, changing, evolving industry? So what kinds of things have you done to create process to continue to be innovative?
Well, that's a good question, and it probably goes back to our startup DNA on, what is the right balance of being quick and nimble and actually not having a lot of process inside a company versus as you grow and as you mature, having to put more processes in place to reduce risk and to increase repeatability and the rest. So it's interesting. I'd say over the last 10 years, we've had to kind of walk a fine line on what that looks like. And as we've grown as a company, myself and some of the others that helped found the company came out of working at big, giant aerospace companies. So we understand process, and we understand, the way of running a business or running product development kind of at one extreme end. And then we, tried to do, we've done a startup, and so we understand what it is at the other extreme end. So we've sort of tried to walk that line. It's without getting too far into the, I'd say, rigorous process. So I'd say in areas where we have had developed products that we have been selling or interfacing with some of the larger agricultural companies, those are places where we've had to kind of, I guess I call it impedance matching, but where we've had to kind of meet them. They have a certain expectation of where level of maturity, level of documentation, level of process of certain products or things we may be delivering to them. So if it's some type of measurements we're taking in the imagery, they want to know that those measurements are going to be the same next year when they order the same thing again, the rest. And so in those cases, we've focused and we've put down process controls and version control and tracking and all the rest. But when it comes to doing new products, we still kind of try to keep it open and nimble.
The Gartner Group hype curve, for those of you out in the audience who are not familiar with that, you have a technology trigger, spikes up interest, people flood into the industry either trying to create a product or sell a product, then things don't match, there is overinflated expectations, and you enter a trough of disillusionment, trying to figure out why it's not working and where's the market go from here. Where is the drone industry relative to the Gartner Group hype curve?
So I love the Gartner hype curve. I kind of learned about it when we were first starting Sentera, and I said, "This is perfect. This tells the story. Drones, they've gone through their hype, and we're like that was quick, and now we're going to get through the trough of disillusionment. Now we're on the what do they call it? The plateau of productivity, when it slowly increases." And I said, "This is where we are today. We're right at the bottom of that, and it's perfect timing." Well, I'd say I was a little optimistic there. I think there was still plenty of hype to work through that we have been working through over the last decade. I think a lot of the hype is past. There's still, we talked about the New Jersey thing. There's still sort of a little bit of mania that can happen at certain times, but I think with delivery drones, some of that stuff is still early, and maybe there's a little bit of the hype bubble might still be around. But in other parts of industries, we're well past that. And so I think in Sentera's business specifically in agriculture, there was definitely a lot of hype around what can drones do for farmers, and is it gonna solve all their problems? And 10 years ago, there was a lot of inflated expectations, and a lot of people thought there were these magical flying robots that could somehow, nobody knew how, but somehow it was going to change everything. That a lot of those ideas haven't really panned out, but there have been things that have. So I talked about the seed breeding and the product development use case, and how companies are they've said they're never going back, and in fact they're changing the way they run business and plant fields around that. So this that type of use case. In other industries, you think about power line inspection or cell phone tower inspection. These were industries that we dabbled in early on. We were probably a little too early for those, but I'd say in the last 5 years, that has become mature and the regular way of doing business, inspecting power lines and inspecting solar farms and the rest. It's largely being done by drones in the air, and there's kind of standard and mature ways, processes, and there's even industry associations starting to form up around these and what are best practices for capturing that type of information. And so it's happening and it's there, and a lot of it is kind of in the background and you may not see it, but they're finally becoming respected as useful tools for the jobs they can do.
How do you see, real quickly, how do you see Sentera evolving over the next 10 years?
So I do think we are going to get back to how can for Sentera specifically, how can the technology and products we're doing actually make it to the farm gate, actually make it to helping direct farmers, farmers directly manage the way they grow and manage their fields. That is sort of the big prize, so to speak. That's the most acres that are out there and the most dollars and the most everything is really on actual grain production and actual food production in this country and around the world. So I do think that over time we're going to get back to having our certain parts of our product portfolio and technology that are addressing that market will be kind of a shift focus back to that. But we've had to wait. We've had to wait for the market to mature, wait for technology to mature, and wait for that market to get ready for where we're at.
Okay. Question or two? Jack, right here in front.
How about the electrical part of the drone? I take it there's batteries, lithium batteries?
Yeah.
So in case you didn't hear it in the back, Jack's question was about the powering the drone, battery technology. What do you think about that, Todd?
Yeah. Well, did you have a specific question on the batteries, or?
Well, we know that I've read that the lithium batteries, of course, are heavy, like in the automobiles. For a Tesla, it's 1,200 pounds.
Yeah.
We know they're working on technology for solid-state batteries.
Right.
It's half the weight.
Right.
And they think they're eventually going to get a car to a solid-state battery, maybe it's 10 years away, where on one charge you can go 1,000 miles.
For sure, yeah.
Well, how does that affect the drones as far as weight or cost?
Yeah, well, drones are going to benefit from that for sure as well. And so there was sort of a revolution it's almost 20 years ago now, when lithium batteries became a thing, so to speak, right? Before that, the chemistry that was used in batteries were like lead acid. You might have heard of lead acid batteries in your car, or NiCad batteries the rechargeable kind you could buy at Target or whatnot. So that was sort of the state of batteries for a long time. Lithium batteries came around, and it was a massive increase in battery technology, and that was really driven by laptops and cell phones and the need to miniaturize the power sources. So anyway, it's been about 20 years, and there's been slow, steady improvements in lithium battery technology over the last 20 years, but it wasn't that sort of step change like we had there in the early 2000s. So I think, electric vehicles seem to be the thing that's really pushing that state of the art right now. So obviously Tesla's got their massive battery factories, and the other battery manufacturers that are out there, Samsung is a major one in the business, and a few others. They're really pushing the state of what they can manufacture and the cost for what they can manufacture them, really targeting that electric vehicle use case. I think any other vehicle, whether they're a car or a truck or a drone or a tractor or any of this other type of stuff, is going to benefit from that. But I think it's more on it's on that plateau of productivity. It's on the slowly increasing side of things. You know what I mean? Yeah, right.
Any other questions? Yeah. Yes, in the back there.
Todd, Alex, wondering about with the software technology in Sentera, what kind of influence or what kind of factor does AI have?
Just a question, if you didn't hear it over here, was what role does AI play and factor of AI into the software side of what Sentera is offering?
Yeah. So good question. So we use the term AI quite a bit. I think, AI now with sort of modern interpretation of that with these large language models and the rest is sort of a new stage of AI. But the idea of artificial intelligence and using neural networks and machine learning technology has been around for a long time. And Sentera, we use that technology a lot. And that's fundamental in a lot of what we do for analyzing the imagery. So I guess I haven't talked a lot about examples, but a common thing that we do is we'll fly a drone over a field, we'll take a bunch of pictures, and they'll plant the field, and then about 2 weeks later, 1 or 2 weeks later, the plants will start to come out of the ground, fly a drone over the field and count how many plants are there. They know pretty accurately how many seeds they put in the ground because their tractors have a lot of technology on them, and they track every seed as it goes in the ground, and they even record a GPS point of where every seed went in the ground. They have tons of information about what they planted. They don't have a lot of information about what happened after that. And so by flying the drone over the field, we take a bunch of imagery and we count all the corn plants. Well, how do we count all the corn plants? It's basically facial recognition for corn plants. So instead of detecting faces, we're detecting corn plants, different than maybe some weeds that might be growing in the field or some old soybeans that are left over from the previous season or something like that. And so by using, machine learning or AI technology, that's how we're actually processing the images and extracting the information, whether it's counting plants, measuring the size of those plants after we've counted them, doing things about like how healthy are they, or how does one part of the field compare to another part of the field, and how does that have to do with maybe different amount of fertilizer or water or moisture that has happened in different parts of the field. All of that kind of comes together into one piece. So it's pretty important to what we're doing, to answer your question.
All right. I'd see a bunch of questions. I want to ask him a couple more things. If you're willing to write it down and give it to me, I'll try to figure out how Todd maybe can get to that. But anyway, thanks for the questions. I hope to get them. So Todd, lightning round, couple of really quick hitting questions, short answer, what pops in your brain. If you're launching a tech startup today on a limited budget, what would your first move be?
If I were doing, and sometimes I think about this too, right? It's like, well, what's next? If and when there is a next after Sentera, or what would I go do? And I would, at this stage, I would try to focus on building a prototype of whatever the idea was, and trying to get as much done by bootstrapping before going out and actually bringing a significant investment in. Is get as many points on the ground. And get as far along as we can up until the point when it's appropriate to go find external investment. Doing that, I think you're just as an innovator and as an entrepreneur, you're in a lot better spot if you've got some tangible products, some tangible goods before you're raising money.
I agree 100%. What is one common mistake that you think startup business leaders make?
So I think not listening to customers potentially, or not being willing to adjust what they're doing based on what they're hearing from their customers or from their potential customers. I think sometimes, and I've seen, Sentera's guilty of this too, where we said, here's our idea, we think we're smarter, we think this is the right way of doing it, and we stay focused on that. And in retrospect, if we think back to what some of our potential customers might have been saying, they said, well, actually, this is what I value over here, or this little way, a different thing of doing it. And we probably, if we would have listened, we could have put more effort into that, and probably that particular project or whatever we're working on there would have had a better success.
What advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs?
Listen to your customers, or right. I think so. At least that's served me the best in my career so far, is actually trying to understand and listen to what customers said and try to address that directly and say, customers will tell you what it is that will make them part with money, right? And give it to you. So, just let them tell you.
Regarding you personally, what's a piece of advice that you wish you would have been told earlier in your career, other than listen to your customers?
Yeah. I mean, this is maybe life advice, I think, but, be okay with letting go. and be okay with, like, we worked on one thing and that didn't work out and it had its time and you put your heart and soul into it, but that's okay. Set it aside. Time to work on the new thing, right? And so that's, and maybe as an engineer or with an engineering background or a technical person, you feel like you really pour a lot of yourself into this technical product, and but things don't last forever, and so things have a natural life cycle, and some things last longer than others, and it's always be ready to move on to the next thing.
Last thing, what's one item you'd like the audience to take with them today regarding your session?
Boy, I don't know. That's a good question.
Listen to your customers.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, for sure. Listen to your customers. I think in terms of drones and how they fit in with society and the rest, just realize that they're just a tool. They're just if people are using them to fly around on a farm field, they're not there trying to spy on you or your neighbors or anything rest. They're just trying to take pictures of corn and soybeans, and the corn and soybeans don't mind. So it's all right.
So our next session is March 6th. Again, we'll be talking about business acquisitions as a way to become an entrepreneur. And if you're interested or know someone who is interested in acquiring a company, this is the session for you. So with that, let's thank Todd.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.